Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. In this chapter, Kate Goslin is going to spend a lot of time trying to convince us all that her children were never expelled from school. You want to get in?
No, you talk first.
Okay. In late 2010, it was widely reported by the tabloids and most major news gathering organizations that 2 of the Goslin children were expelled from their kindergarten.
And they in kindergarten is actually but at least they don't they break your games if you're not so good with them.
They break your games?
If you're not so good with them, then they break your games. Get it? Can I sleep in the lap?
Why would they break your games? Like, what would be the point of that?
Oh, because they're so glitchy. Okay, it's your turn.
All right, so getting back to Kate Goslin. I had known about the situation for over a month, Hoffman writes, but out of respect for John and the children, I figured the reason for the deafening silence was because they didn't know how to spin it in Kate's favor. Finally, People magazine, the great Kate Goslin apologist, gave us the first hint of Discovery's spin.
And they used to be made of metal sometimes. Did you know in my school you can only have up to 5 books. If you have any more than that, then you can't get any more books than that.
That's so unfair. Do you need to take a book back tomorrow? Yeah, for the library. That's a good idea.
I do never want to bring the Minecraft back or Dwayne Johnson.
You love your Dwayne Johnson book?
Yeah.
All right, friends. So normally I do my recording when the kids are at school and they've been off because of conferences, and I thought they were busy doing something. But it's the next day, and here I am again to talk to you about how the Goslin kids were expelled from school. All right. Okay. So it was in 2010 when there was like this breaking news on TV. I remember seeing it. It was all over the news. Basically, people were talking about this rumor that a couple of the Goslin children had been expelled from their like swanky private school. All right. And they were in kindergarten at the time. Like, it seems like it would be pretty hard to get expelled from kindergarten, but it is a private school, so they get to make the choice about who stays and who goes. For me, I remember thinking, like, wondering if one of them had autism or some kind of other neurological difference, because I know there are a lot of private schools who would just be like, we can't handle that type of need. Like, if there's any kind of support that's needed, we can't do that. So it was crazy for me when it eventually started coming out that there were actually just like pretty severe behavioral issues going on with the kids. But Goslin writes a whole chapter about what went down because he alleges that Kate was like frantically trying to cover this all up. Okay, so Hoffman writes, in late 2010, it was widely reported by the tabloids and most major news gathering organizations that 2 of the Goslin children were expelled from their kindergarten. I had known about the situation for over a month, and he goes on to say, like, he didn't report about it because he was trying to respect John, who gave him some of the information. And he decided that the reason people weren't talking about it was because TLC was trying to figure out, like, how to spin this, okay? So eventually, People magazine, he calls it the Great Kate Goslin Apologist, gave some sort of like indication that this is what TLC wanted them to say about the situation. And People magazine writes, a source tells People, which Hoffman is kind of like insinuating it was going to be Kate or TLC saying this. The situation is being grossly overstated. The kids are going through a challenging time, but Kate doesn't feel this is something that should be discussed publicly. It is a private matter. TLC had no comment, but a source close to the situation says Kate's #1 concern is protecting her children and is keeping their personal situation as a private matter that she works out with her kids. Okay, that all makes perfect sense to me. It probably does to you too. Like, these kids deserve their privacy. I mean, if they got expelled from kindergarten, nobody needs to know that. I totally agree with that. These poor children, it's sad that they even have to be on the news like this. But Hoffman goes on in this chapter because he wants us to know, like, there's more to what's going on here, right? And then the other thing is, one of the reasons that I am really interested in this is because of what happened with Colin later. because of what Kate did with Colin. Because of the way Colin was essentially kicked out of the house and sent off to live on a psych unit, essentially, it's really important that we do look back and know what happened early on, like how this all started. So Hoffman goes on to talk about how like maybe they could have, all right, fine, this is the way you want it to be. Okay, could you stop there? TLC has put out their statement by saying like she doesn't want to talk about this as a private matter. But guess what? She's not going to stop there because she is going to milk this for all that it's worth. And that's really what Hoffman is talking about in this chapter. So it was like a month later that Kate Goslin ends up going on to Entertainment Tonight to talk about this situation. And Hoffman argues that he talks about how in all of Kate's interviews during this time, she gave a list of approved questions. So this would have been one of the questions that they were allowed to ask. So Kate is okaying talking about this issue. She knows she needs to talk about it. And I think I think Hoffman is insinuating she wants to talk about this. She knows it's bringing like attention to her. Okay, so she's asked, were 2 of your children expelled? And Kate says, 2 of my children, are being tutored at home with a teacher who is working closely with our kindergarten teachers in school doing the identical curriculum. The pressure was just getting to them. You have the divorce anger mixed in with that. The goal is to get them back into school as soon as possible. Okay, so this also makes sense. I can see that maybe this school was like, look, the kids have to go, but we'll work with you. And we can try again next year. Let's get them back on track. So this makes sense to me that maybe the tutor was working with the school. So once again, like, okay, maybe this is the end of it and everything's been put to rest. But no, because it was in December of 2010 that Kate sat down with Meredith Vieira on the Today Show. She seems to often do interviews with Meredith Vieira to get her side of the story out. And this is a part of the interview. Meredith Vieira states, let's separate fact from fiction, beginning with your kids. 2 of the sextuplets, Colin and Alexis. It's so sad that they even name them. Reports are that they were expelled from their school. True or false? Kate Goslin says, that is false. They were not expelled from school. We have a situation where we are in. My kids are in an academically excelling school. Of course, I'm sure she did pick the private school that had like the roughest curriculum. You have to be tested to get in there. And it makes me sad that everything has to be so extreme for these kids and they all have to do the exact same thing, go to the same school, when some of them, probably were like, I don't want to be like tested out the wazoo in kindergarten. Okay. So she says, like, they're just going to a really academically excelling school because my 8 little miracles are going to be geniuses. Okay. Where academics are pushed, and I fully support it, combined with kids who are just having gone through a divorce of their parents, suffering all those normal feelings, and the 2 collided, and they were just not doing well with the combination. They were having anger issues, they were acting out, having behavior things, things that I felt very alone. Because of course this is about her. She felt very alone in it. But once I did the research, talked to other moms, that have gone through divorces, it was very normal stuff in that regard. So I did what I could. We mutually agreed. I brought them home. Okay. I have them with a private tutor, early education teacher, and she's teaching them one-on-one. All is well again, dealing with the very normal results of a divorce. I think we have done very well. I know going through a divorce, I knew what to watch for. It will happen, and this is not abnormal at all. Along with weekly therapy, my kids are back, they're happy, they're functioning, and all is well again. All right, so once again, like, it's good to hear that they're in therapy. It's good to hear, like, there is some acknowledgement of, like, these behaviors could be normalized, but, like, they're going through a lot in their lives. I'm glad for that. But just the way that Kate talks about it just rubs me the wrong way. I can just hear her voice in my head and how she would be about this. She's like very defensive, and probably at home she's like, you better get yourself back into that kindergarten right now, to these like little kindergartners. I just don't believe that at home she's like, it's very normal to have these feelings and I really love you guys. I sincerely doubt that that's what's happening when the cameras are not there. So Kate told Vieira it was a mutually agreed upon removal until the school figures out how to deal with their needs. Okay, so Hoffman goes on to state, In the most technical sense, Kate was correct when she said the kids were not expelled. They weren't expelled, only because the school didn't want to use that word because Kate asked them not to. On April 1st, 2011, exactly 4 months to the day after Kate's interview with Meredith Vieira, when the issue should have been long forgotten, guess what? Kate brought it up, she brought it up, and approved this line of questioning on yet another interview with Matt Lauer on the Today Show. And Matt Lauer says, there were reports that they had been kicked out of school. You actually took them out because you were having some behavior issues. And Kate nods. So hard for me. They're still at home. They're not back in school. Why? Matt asks. And Kate says, they're actually starting to integrate back in within the very imminent future. They better get back in there. That's what she's saying, like under her breath. And there was actually medical issues, like, oh my God, medical issues. I was just like, they were low on vitamin D. So I know that that's what caused them to bite and hit a teacher. There were medical issues that we dealt with, and they're doing wonderfully at home. They're reading at the top level of kindergarten as well as writing, and they're doing amazingly well. So I know, looking back now, I made the right decision. I did the right thing, and they're blossoming. So. And Matt says, I think you even said at the time you were open about it, you said that they were clearly some fallout from the divorce here, and there's a lot of emotional strain. I don't want to read all of this. And so do you think the negative behaviors could be attributed to that, is essentially what Matt is asking. And Kate says, every child whose parents are, divorced will go through some negative behaviors. I mean, Colin and Alexis's therapist said, a third of the kids will all sail through perfectly, a third of the kids will do horribly, and a third of the kids will get through it with counseling. So she said, you don't ever know which kids will do what, but the most important thing is for you to have a positive attitude, to pick up, where your family left off, and to continue with these traditions, which is what I'm doing, and we're actually doing really, really good now. I mean, again, I think that she's saying a lot of the right things here. This all sounds like really good, like the therapy, like she's basically spouting what the therapist tells her to say. But I just can't believe that at home she's not like, you are going to make this private school work. Like I just can't believe that based upon all the prior behaviors, based upon everything we've read in this book, the fact that Kate refuses to go to therapy herself, the fact that Kate was told by a therapist, I think you have bipolar disorder, and she was like, hell to the no, not me, She is kind of putting on an act here, but I mean, she says the right things. It's like she knows what she's supposed to be doing, but she's not going to do it. So she just keeps going on interview after interview about the kids. And once again, it annoys me that they identified who it was. I don't know if they had to. Maybe people had already said it. I don't know. And that's really what Hoffman is bringing up here. He's like, why are there so many interviews about this with Kate? And he says, now because of all these interviews where Kate is really manipulating everything, let me tell you the truth. All right, so here we go. Hoffman writes, now let's examine the truth. In a letter from October 2010, Junior Theory, business manager for the kids' school, informed Kate that she would be receiving a tuition refund as a result of the separation from school for Alexis and Colin at the request of the school. Theory explained effective October 22nd, 2010, a prorated tuition refund in the amount of $3,856 for each child was going to be processed the next week. He also enclosed a statement for one-on-one support through October 8th, 2010, and said that the final invoice support would be coming soon. That's interesting. So that means that at least one of the kids, maybe both of them, had already been receiving one-on-one support in the classroom, and that they still weren't able to make it work. That one-on-one support obviously didn't help the situation, so the school was left with no other choice but to separate the children from the school, no matter how Kate tried to spin it or what words they choose to use in their interviews. Okay, so Hoffman lets us know that the National Enquirer was actually the news source that got it the most right by posting on Radar Online that one of the expelled Goslin kids physically harmed an adult at the school 2 times, creating a situation that caused school administrators to believe they had no choice but to remove that child from school. The nature and extent of the adult's injuries are not known, but the situation was severe enough that it contributed heavily to the school's decision to expel the children. One of the Goslin children were abusive to the other children in the school, creating an untenable situation. Both John and Kate were sent a letter from the head of school explaining that despite their best efforts, staff had reached a point at which they had to request the children enroll in another program. While the teacher was able to achieve some success, it became apparent to the school that the pair needed intensive assistance to help them with their social, emotional, and academic needs. The demand on the children's classroom teachers and the impact on the other kids is just too great. That was a quote. That's so sad. I continue to be sad that they named the children who had to deal with this. And, you know, a lot could be going on here. As we've stated before, like a private school, some private schools aren't necessarily set up to handle children with any kind of special need, right? And they get to pick and choose who's allowed into the school, so they could very quickly and easily just be like, we're not doing this. Although it seems like they would be hesitant to do that because Kate was such a public figure. Now, from my point of view, I look at this and I go, looking at everything that happened with Colin, I think to myself, I wonder if Kate was just like fully unwilling to look at Colin and say, okay, maybe he needs like something different. He needs to be in a different school, right? Because eventually it seems like Alexis reintegrates, but Colin doesn't, and she ends up sending Colin off. Maybe instead of sending him away because he didn't fit in with the other kids and what the other kids were able to do, she could have looked for like a less academically challenging school, or you know, some kind of a special school where it's like they focus on the arts, or they focus on like, there's like forest school. She had so much money. They were paying so much money for this school, they really could. Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really looking at it like it seems that there was some stuff going on that could have been very normal for kids that are going through a lot of change, that have a lot of issues going on at home, right? Okay, it's normal, but how are you helping them? How are you treating them? Well, I think what was most important, and that's what's being emphasized here, is that Kate wanted it to look a certain way in the public. That was what was important to her. Okay, meanwhile on Twitter, fans were hounding Kate Goslin asking for more information, and they were saying like, why would this happen with 8-year-olds? So meanwhile, Kate's fans were like hounding her on Twitter, asking questions about what was going on. Sorry, my dog's under here and I'm petting him. Asking her like what was going on with the kids, like why would they be expelled so young? And Kate was just saying a bunch of random things. Like at one point she was like, I don't even know what you guys are talking about, even though she had done like 5 interviews about it. Okay, but Hoffman writes, I later found out that the situation was even worse than I originally knew. In 2012, I learned that some new details about the expulsion of the Goslin children and their interactions, or lack of interactions, with certain school employees, as well as John's treatment of them at home over the summer. I believe this information will come out after this book is published from the people who should be dealing with the situation. This is one part of the story that I can't divulge because I gave my word that I wouldn't. Okay, so then he gives this quote from Kate Goslin. When I speak, my yardstick is my kids. They can pull this up forever. I don't want them to see anything that's negative that ever came out of my mouth, Kate Goslin once said on the Ellen DeGeneres show. All right, so doing some additional research into this, I don't think a lot of things were ever, there wasn't a lot of more information given out about the kids, which makes sense, right? Which makes sense. They do fully deserve their privacy. I did read, and this was just a rumor, that one of the issues that the school had is that they wanted Kate to do certain things, like let the kids meet with their counselor, have Kate do some counseling about how to handle the kids, and she didn't want that. So that was something that I read about that like caused some of the separation with the school as well, was like there were certain things that they wanted, and Kate was like, I'm not doing that because of like the publicity of it, whatever, until it got so bad that the kids couldn't stay there anymore. And Alexis was able to rejoin, and then Colin rejoined for a while and eventually was sent away. So it's difficult to think about everything that happened with these kids. All right, so I found that like a really interesting part of the book. I'm going to stop here so that I can move on to doing a little bit more of my Brittany book. I hope you will join me again when we head down another rabbit hole.